Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome to another interview on the JayBee and Milly channel. I am JayBee, and of course with me is Milly.
Hi.
We have Dan,
Hi.
and the special guest who will be interviewing today is Kevin Altieri. Thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure.
So I've had a look through your IMDb, and there's so many cool and interesting things, and it details work about what you did as a director and a storyboard artist dating back to the 80s. But I want to build a picture of that at the start. What led you down that path of doing the directing and storyboard art?
Well, I mean, I've been doing, I've kind of been planning this ever since I was 4 years old, you know. So when I was about, 4 years old or whatever, my dad took me to see The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad at, what do you call it, at where I was going to go to school, grade school I was going to be in, and I was 4 years old. And basically, I didn't really what I was going to go see or anything. And I walked in, my dad, as usual, was late, so I look and they had the auditorium with like all these little chairs pulled out, and so I was sitting down and I look up and I just see, oh, these guys, they got swords and stuff, they're a bunch of pirates and, they're walking towards, this island. It's like, oh, this is really cool. And then all of a sudden you get to there's this tunnel, this really cool looking tunnel. And this guy comes running out, help, help, and then the Cyclops comes out, and I was just, what the heck is going on? I had no idea. I was not expecting that. And I was just fascinated by the stop motion animation, and of course I had seen cartoons and things like that, but that really kind of clicked. And the next thing I knew, I was like just sitting there just drawing on whatever I could draw on, of like trying to capture the Cyclops from Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And from then on, and it's like, and kids would like go and say, whoa, what are you doing? And that was kind of like the catalyst that got me started. And then years, I won't go through high school and grade school and all that, my experiences there. But when I ended up in California, the first professional work that I got was doing comic books, cartoons, and I wanted to do comics. I was in love with comics. I wanted to do comics, so I was doing comics for cartoons. And then that kind of led me into working with friends of mine who were model makers in like all those really cheap late 70s, early 80s science fiction movies after Star Wars. It's just like I worked on things like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, and Dungeon Master 2 with David Allen, and Robot Jocks was another big one that I was on. I was just special effects, and I was kind of enjoying myself doing that. And then I heard that I couldn't get into the union because there was like the thing, I didn't graduate from any of the art schools that would get you into Disney or into Filmation or Hanna-Barbera. So I couldn't get into the union, and all of a sudden Deke, who was doing at the time Inspector Gadget, opened up offices in Studio City, California, which was near enough to where I was. And I went there and stuck my head, and I had a bunch of storyboards that I was doing for David Allen, stop motion storyboards. And I showed them, and they went, oh, yeah, come on in. It's like, can you start right now? And I'm like, well, can I go home and change my clothes or something? Because it's like it was all hot and sweaty out. And that's kind of how I got started in animation. I was a big Miyazaki fan, and I didn't know who Miyazaki was, but I just had all these film books of his. And of course, growing up, I was really into cartoons. I loved Scooby Doo. I loved Johnny Quest. I was like I followed Alex Toth, doing his comics and stuff ever since I was a kid. There was just something great about Alex Toth and the simplicity of his line and how confident his drawing was. And I could spot him. And when, after there was all these cartoons coming out when I was a little kid, and I followed them, like Johnny Quest was like my was godhood for me. And and then when Scooby Doo came out, it was a little mamby-pamby for me when I was, 13 years old or 14, whenever it came out, but it was just so much fun and so well drawn that I followed it. I especially loved the monsters. I loved the designs of the monsters. They were so great. And that's, and then that's how I got into animation. I was at Deke. The first show I did was Kid Video, and I was doing storyboards there. And then, I worked on Jason the Wheeled Warriors and the litany of all the Deke cartoons that I worked on. Cops, Alf Tales. And Alf Tales was in Real Ghostbusters. And about the time I was doing Real Ghostbusters, I wasn't credited at it, but I was in charge of all the storyboards. And that's about the time I really started directing, because I was in charge of the whole show.
Awesome.
And
So I was just going to say, that's amazing. And there's certainly so many elements of your career that we're really excited to dig into. One thing that I really like that you mentioned is how, Scooby was drawn and everything. I know, like you said, you had such a defining moment when you were so young, but was there any artists or genres that really cemented for you the path you were on?
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, I followed, I was different than most kids. But I followed Jack Kirby. If Jack Kirby did a comic, I'd buy it. I'd look for it. Neil Adams doing Batman was, whatever Neil Adams did. Once Neil Adams showed up on the scene doing comics, it was like I was just in love with just the way he drew. Alex Toth, of course, was the best. And I loved comics. I loved Joe Kubert's comics. I love Sergeant Rock, Russ Heath, It's the artists that I loved. And I love horror comics, the Warren horror comics. And Alex Toth was big in that, and just all the artists that worked on that. Jack Davis was another big influence, and Robert Crumb, the underground cartoonist, because when I was a little kid, he would do all these greeting cards, and I was just fascinated by the way he drew. And I would try and copy it, the influences are just vast. And all the guys that did cartoons, Looney Tunes, Fleischer Brothers. I was just, the Popeyes, the 1930s Popeyes. They used to play those on television when I was a little kid. And I loved all of those. And of course, all the Disney features, So yeah, I was influenced by so much. I had so many influences that I was confused about how to draw, what to do, I loved everything.
Yeah, and I suppose moving on to Scooby, we know that your first Scooby credit was for Pirates Ahoy in 2006. And
Yes.
I know obviously we've touched on, you said you grew up with Scooby, so how familiar were you with the franchise before you officially joined on?
Well, that was after I was directing on Batman, and there was a period where I had done Gen 13, and that was done. I think if I remember correctly, it was after I did the Pearl Jam video. I believe it was after I did the Pearl Jam video, and directed that, and then I was directing the Stripperella cartoon. And then there was a period where I was unemployed right after the first season of Stripperella. And I got a phone call from Joe Horn saying, "Hey, I'm going to be directing on Scooby Doo. Would you be interested?" And I'm like, this will be really refreshing, because they were still using the Iwo Takamoto model pack. So all the character designs were Iwo Takamoto and Toth. And I was like, this is going to be fun. So that yeah, and it was Pirates Ahoy, and I actually storyboarded. They gave me the storyboard for the opening section, where the pirates, take over the ship, and the scientist, he escapes, and again, it was like I had worked with Ron Perlman, who did the voice of the lead pirate, and that just the voice work was just great. You know, it was Warner Brothers at that time. It was just all the voice acting was so good and so much fun. And it's the same, I believe it was the same cast. You know, Frank Welker was still there. And he'd worked on Batman too, so I'd met him before. And I just took my usual process is that I would blue pencil the storyboard, you know, rough. I would do my pretty complete rough, but I would do my rough storyboard pencil, and I loved the fact, and I loved doing introduction of the characters in the Mystery Machine, and I tried to add a little bit more, and I said, you know what I think I'm going to do here is I'm going to have Daphne actually be a girly girl. So I had Daphne put her feet on the dashboard and was painting her nails, you know, and they're all doing their thing, but I had Daphne painting her nails while Fred's driving and he's like trying to figure out where they're going. And Scooby and Shaggy had their heads out the window, you know, like because they're dogs. Anyway, I was just trying to be funny. Anyway, but that whole thing with them sinking the ship and all, you know, all that stuff. I did all that section and I handed it in, and I was hired for like 6 weeks because those direct-to-videos were on a very tight schedule. I think later on when this was when I think Joe Sitka, I'm not sure if he was in charge, but he was certainly the writer. But the Joe Sitka ones was the ones I worked on, and they were on a pretty tight schedule. So the quality that they came out with was actually quite remarkable. And and I handed in my storyboard, and I would hand in my rough, and usually you hand in the rough, and then it goes to whoever the powers, the directors, and they all get together, come up with their changes and hand it back to you, and then you do your finish. And they actually went to me, and Joe came back to me, Joe Horn, and he goes, well, you're done. And I'm like, what? What do you mean I'm done? Don't you want me to clean it up? And he said, nope, they like it the way it is. So he went, no changes. He says that they just want, maybe when they get a model for the guy on deck, that maybe, you know, this guy that he talks to on deck, the sailor, you know, but I'll just do that, you know. And he says, nope, but they love your blue pencil. He said, don't change it. So
it's really interesting, especially like the attention to detail you mentioned that you gave to Daphne doing her nails. Definitely a scene that was quite iconic to her at that time as well. Just that great introduction for that movie. But was there a character, I guess, honing in on that Mystery Inc. Scooby guy that you were particularly excited to reimagine in certain scenarios when signing on to the movie?
Well, reimagining. Well, I mean, I really enjoy, and again, it's like the Wiio Takamoto character designs, just those designs. I love drawing Shaggy. You know, he's so expressive. And I don't think I'm unique in this, but not many people really did it. But I had Daphne act like she is Fred's girlfriend. Like when he's like embarrassed by his dad and stuff, you know, and Tim Conway playing the dad was like great. It's just great, you know. And she's like, you know, and she'll put her arm through his, you know, and just and you know, and do small things like that, you know, so it's not overt or anything. There's still the Scooby gang, but you know, she acts like she's his girlfriend, cares about him, you know. And I had Shaggy actually do things like act like Scooby's his pet. He's raised him from a puppy. You know, he'll put his hand on Scooby's head and scratch, you know, rough it up. Doing things like that I enjoyed doing. And this is kind of finishing the previous story. It's like, so I was done in 2 weeks, and I had several more weeks of employment. And they said, well, you can go home. You know, you're done. You've done your section. And I said, well, you know, do you have anything else you need help? And they said, well, Jennifer, she's actually been doing the Harley Quinn show. I've worked with her since then, but this is when I first met Jennifer. And they said, Jennifer Coyle has the whole third act to do. And this is her first time directing. So if you wanted to help her out, you know, that'd be great. And I said, sure. So I meet Jennifer, we get along, and she gives me the romp to do in the third act. And I was like, oh boy. And yes, I ripped off the Bugs Bunny, Buccaneer Bunny routine, where you go in the door and come out, which is actually, I guess, was from the Red Riding Hood one too, the other Bugs Bunny from the 40s. So I just, and I just had fun like doing routines with the pirates. They cut it down too much. Like there's a couple of shots that they didn't like when the Ron Perlman, when the head ghost pirate opens up the door and the cannon's sitting there and it goes boom and he closes the door. They just had it go off and it's just like an explosion or something. I don't quite remember exactly what it was, but the routine actually went where he actually closes the door and leans on the door as if that's going to do anything, and then the cannon goes off, and then the cannonball with the door and the pirate are going across the deck at like a mile a minute. They cut that out. I think they thought it was just too violent.
Oh, well, it certainly would have been so fun to see that in the movie, and it certainly seems like you were part of some great sequences. We always love when that additional characters added to the gang as well, which was just really nice to see here. And how you're saying it went so smoothly, I guess that completely explains why they'd have been so keen to bring you back the following year, where you worked on Chill Out Scooby Doo. I believe that was released the following year. Yes. I know, like you were saying, timeframes are certainly quite strict with the DTVs. So was it quite a quick turnaround from one project to the next, or was it similar to the release dates that there was kind of like a year in between?
Yeah, it was about, I think there was like, they would do those, I think it was about a year in between. Yeah, because I can't even remember what I was doing in between those two projects. I did storyboards or whatever for something else. But yeah, I got called back, and just because it was the same crew, although the director that I was assigned, actually I did the whole board with the, with the especially the third act, where you have, and I'm actually really big in, I'm big into surfing, and I love snowboarding, and I actually went to them, to management there, and it's like John Diaz, I think, and I said, when you guys hired me, I had already got my plane tickets and stuff, but do you mind if I like just 2 days off, at the beginning, but I'm going snowboarding. And and Joe Sitka gave me the section with them going down the mountainside, and Shaggy and Scooby, when the avalanche comes rolling down, Shaggy and Scooby strap, Scooby miraculously makes the snowboards, and they go snowboarding down the mountain and then they make the snow park at the bottom. So I said, this is going to be great research. So I was just snowboarding like an idiot. And then at night at the, the cabin I was staying at, I would just started out drawing that stuff, and they had really good snow that year at the Wasatch in Utah, on the Wasatch Mountains. Like, I think it was Brighton was where I went most of the time. But yeah, it's like, and I again, I did my rough blue pencil, and the director actually he was obsessed with doing changes on everything I did, but me and the the production assistant, God, whose name I forget, if you look at the credits you'll see him, he was a really good guy. He just winked at me and he just went, don't worry, I got you. He had Xeroxed everything I did. So when the board was presented to management or to the client, they actually were like, where's Kevin's blue pencils? Where are the blue pencils? And then he went, wait a second. And he came in with the whole stack, and then, and they approved everything. And that's what's in the show, with a few changes. Like I think Chris had to do like something in the monastery at the very end that he changed. And then again, that kind of put me ahead of the schedule again, just that they approved the blue pencils. And then I got to do the romp inside the cavern. You know, I got to invent like the there's no reason why, if you made a mine, you would make that roller coaster that I designed, you know, for all the rails and stuff with the cars. But yeah, I had a lot to do with that. Me and Mario, we did a lot of that. We did the romp too, and that was a lot of fun. You know,
Yeah, and I
again,
suppose
I wish the schedules were bigger or longer, you know, but yeah, what are you gonna do?
yeah, and I
So
suppose when it comes to your next Scooby project, which was the Goblin King, you were actually the unit director.
yeah,
So at what point going into the project did you know that you were going to be doing that and not being a storyboard artist?
I well, it's like whatever the timeline. Joe Sitka, I think he called me up and said, "Hey, you want to direct the next one?" You know, and I was yeah. I'm trying to think what was in between. Again, I was storyboarding on a couple of projects, and I can't even remember
In between that might have
chronologically
been
what I was
Samurai
doing.
Sword.
Possibly.
No, that was after.
Oh yeah, because that was Casey Kasem's last DTV,
Yeah,
wasn't
it was.
Yeah, yeah. And on Goblin King, this is like an aside, they actually went and said, on this one, they're not going to have Casey Kasem because he's just, you know, his voice is changing. It's like he can't be a youthful Shaggy anymore. But Casey Kasem actually came in with a bag of lemons and he said, look, if you don't like what I did, what I do, but I want to really do Shaggy. And if you don't like what I do, you don't have to use it. So he showed up, you know, for the recording with everyone, you know, and he had a bag of lemons. And every time before he would deliver a line, he'd slice a lemon, squirt it in his throat. Perfect Shaggy, you know,
it?
and that's how he did that, you know. I mean, I think he had to be in his 70s at that point, you know, he had to have been maybe even older. I'm not sure. But that was the last time he did Shaggy, but yeah. And that one, I got the section with the witches and with the Jay Leno, you know, Jack, you know, and Tim Curry as the Goblin King. You know, I got that section too, and it was actually really good. And they were board artists that, you know, I had worked with, you know, before. Like Mario was he was on my team, and I'd worked with him on the previous one, you know. And yeah, no, that one was and I like the fact that for a change, for once, that the storyline had the monsters and stuff were real.
Mm.
Yeah, oh,
And
definitely.
yeah,
But
no, go ahead.
yeah, so just for the people watching who aren't in the animation industry, obviously we've said you were the unit director, but what differentiates that from the director or the director of animation?
Well, it's because it's feature length. It was broken up. It's kind of like in Batman Mask of the Phantasm is another example. There are sections of the show that are handed out to each director, and then there is the overall director of the whole thing, you know. So he's in charge of the whole look of everything and making it all come together and work together. But each, like me, Frame and Alan Caldwell, you know, we would coordinate with each other. And the interesting thing too is like the directors on that were all excellent storyboard artists, you know, and we had all worked together on Chill Out too, so we knew each other, you know. And so me, Sandra had like the beginning, and I had kind of the middle, and Alan I think had the end. But we all ended up boarding on each other's sections. Like, you know, Sandra helped out on mine, you know, and with like the Sleepy Hollow sequence, I pulled in Mike Diedrich, who I'd worked with before, you know, from way back in the deep days till, you know, through Stripperella. And he did the pumpkin patch sequence with the, you know, and then I did a lot of the I loved doing the Headless Horseman sequence. And that I have to admit, I would just jump around and grab things that I really wanted to do. Like Alan at the very end, not my sections are done and finished, and I did like the cabaret sequence down in the with all the monsters. And that was and I had that was like the last thing in my section that I had to do. And I keep going to Joe, where's the song? You know, because there's a song in there, and it's like, and then I have to come up with a dance sequence and stuff. Where's the song? You know, and he was so busy, he's directing everything, and coordinating everything. And then he actually came in one day and he says, "This is the song," and he goes, "Here we are in underground," and he just sings it out to me. And then it's okay, you got it now? Okay, bye. And he goes, it's like, what? So I had this thing in my head that I had to coordinate the dancing and like the monsters, the routines, and which monsters we're using, and we had all the model packs of all of the Alex Toth and Takamoto stuff. So we were pulling like all the monsters, which were actually people in disguise from the early shows, but in this we had them actually be real vampires, real real monsters, Frankenstein monster, and anyway, and Quasimodo. Anyway, so I was doing that, and then miraculously the music that Joe recorded fit. So, so it actually worked. We were actually kind of simpatico at that point because we had been working together
It's
previously.
incredible how that works out. I was like that Goblin song in the bar. There's so many amazing musical numbers there, and just that whole sequence in general is amazing. And I love that you mentioned that, that trio of unit directors, yourself and Sandra and Alan. And what was really interesting about that is, obviously, I think you've seen this, but in the intro, the titles of Goblin King, all of you get animated in like a sequence there, which is absolutely amazing. Do you know where that idea came from? And did you have any like say in your caricature at all?
Not really. It was just done, and I just said, "Don't make me too ugly." But of course, I'm a dead guy, and it's like I'm kind of like a Frankenstein's monster, like but yeah. And Sandy was kind of a pretty vampire,
It's just amazing. It's the only DTV and even I think only Scooby project to actually animate people. I wish that more of them did that. I think that would be so cool and add a lot
Yeah,
more character to that. It's amazing.
yeah, no, and I don't think Joe was in charge of the samurai sword, Scooby, and the sword of the whatever, how the title was. And I actually was supposed to take over, and Joe said that he wrote the script thinking of me because I did martial arts and I had taken Iaido, so I understood swords, samurai sword, katanas, and etc. So he said he had that in mind and he wrote it for me. But I had just interviewed with Greg Weisman and Vic Cook because I was doing storyboards after Scooby. I was doing storyboards again for Jennifer Coyle, who was now doing Spectacular Spider-Man with Vic Cook, and she hired me. And Vic hired me. I actually did like the Green Goblin. He wanted me for the Green Goblin introduction, the Green Goblin. So he gave me that, and it's like a real juicy fight sequence, and I was doing that for him. And then I did several sequences for Jennifer in her episodes. One with the rhino, which actually was a lot of fun to draw. And then that day they went and said, "Hey, we want you to direct on the next season, which we're starting next week. So would you be free?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to. Because Spectacular Spider-Man, really good show. Really good character designs by Sean Galloway, and just, fun to draw. Good scripts by Greg, and all the writers. So I signed on. And after I got out of the interview with them, I'm going down, I'm walking away, I'm going down the street, and my cell phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's Joe, and he says, "Hey, we're starting the next Scooby, and you're directing." And I'm like, "I can't." I can't. I just took a job. because I mean, I would have loved to have directed the whole show, but the way they did them, it's like the schedule is 8 weeks, so we're only talking about 10 weeks for the director to be employed. Whereas on Spider-Man, it's it's a series, it's a year-long commitment. So I couldn't do it. But while I'm directing and doing storyboards and supervising storyboards on Spider-Man, I get a phone call and they said, you got to do this. You got to do the introduction of the Ghost Samurai. I'm sorry, but you got to do it. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so busy. And they're like, nope, you got to do it. So I storyboarded that sequence for them. So I'm still on the Scoobies, And again, that was a lot of fun, and especially with the martial arts sequence with Daphne as a martial arts expert that was a lot of fun to draw.
Oh, I mean,
I
I
would have
could
liked
only
to have done the
imagine.
whole thing. I would have liked to have done the whole thing, that would have been great.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a shame that wasn't possible. But then again, like if there's a series to draw you away from that, like Spectacular Spider-Man is definitely well up there, definitely one of my favorites. But going back to Scooby just for a second now, one thing that always, shocks me in hindsight is just how many names get thrown about there for the DTVs. I guess you can kind of always associate them with maybe they're a bit on the lower end of the budget side. But then when you think about something like Goblin King, you've got Wallace Shawn and Hayden Panettiere. There's just so many absolute stars on those things. Did you interact with them at all for that movie?
Me, not so much. Because the way the schedule was, like Joe generally handled the voice directing. But the fact that Lauren Bacall is doing the head witch was just, I mean, I really, when it's Lauren Bacall, and I was able to get her humor in the drawings, and I just had to do the witches myself. I just thinking who was doing the voices. Yeah, and Wally Shawn was so good.
Yeah. Iconic.
And there was so much more. That was also, it's funny that this was the only Scooby where the monsters are real. It's real, it's real magic that's working and everything. And this one was a pure musical. Wally Shawn just burst into song, and it's not like anyone like questions it, the characters, and then there's the cabaret one, again, another musical sequence, and Tim Curry was so good as the Goblin King, and as the he was also in the section I did, he was also the werewolf caretaker of the graveyard, and again, it's like the voices were just so good. And Jay Leno, and Joe, I asked Joe, says, you got Jay Leno to play the Pumpkinhead, the headless horseman's Pumpkinhead? How'd you do that? And he said, I didn't have to do it. It's like they're asking us, because all of these all the actors have kids and grandchildren, or relatives, little kids that they know, and they all want to do Scooby because the kids love Scooby. And interesting thing, they had the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and they had I forget her name now, but little girl, she was like seriously ill, and had to go through really bad treatments. I think it was leukemia, something like that. So she had very painful, very bad treatments. And apparently she had something called Scooby Doo time, where she loved the direct-to-video Scoobies. And so when she'd have the treatments and stuff, and the doctors would be coming in to give her injections or whatever they were doing, the nurses would stop anyone from coming in there. If she was watching Scooby Doo, they would leave her alone. So she had Scooby time. And they were doing the other, I can't remember which, because during that they had like one of those strangely designed Scooby ones that don't look like Iwo Takamoto, and and they were doing that series. And she wanted to come by and see that this was her Make-A-Wish thing, was come out while they were making a Scooby. And here's a kid who's like seriously, seriously ill. And they said, well, we've got this series we're doing, so you can come out right now because the next Scooby direct-to-video is not going to start for at least 3 months. And she said, I'll wait. So she came out and visited, and she actually does the little girl blowing a raspberry at the magician. And that's actually her. That's actually her.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
That
And I
was-
think I have to completely agree with her. I think I'd have wanted to wait for the DTV as well.
Definitely.
because the DTVs, it's very strange, but whenever they do a new Scooby-Doo, like the Velma show or whatever that they just did, I don't know what it is, why they have to go through those horrible redesigns.
Mm.
Because Scooby-Doo isn't Scooby-Doo to me unless it's those characters, and those voices. It's like changing that is just never works. There's just something very pure about those. Just the Takamoto and Alex Toth designs, are so pure and beautiful, and they're so simple, and they're just, you just like drawing them. I mean, that's me, and because people would, and after coming off of Batman the Animated Series and the Pearl Jam video, which is a serious animation, and that's how I draw. And people would go and say, well, you've come down quite a bit now that you're doing Scooby-Doos. And I'm like, well, that might be offensive to me, except that I love Scooby-Doo. So stick it, bunch of jealous weirdos.
See, there's something there that I have to agree with you on, is that it's just those initial looks are just so iconic. They are what we all know as the gang. I know we've discussed with some people like the theory of you can just see the block colors of the gang and you know exactly who it is from those original designs. And when something's that iconic, there is no need to vary away from it. If you know them just on a couple of block colors, you don't mess with that formula.
No.
But something that certainly has kind of changed a little bit over time that I'm kind of interested to find out a little bit more of is, as I know you've mentioned, in Goblin King it was real supernatural elements, and since then we've not seen that happen. It's certainly something that sometimes seems to be met with a little bit of kind of hesitancy on the Warner Brothers side of things, that sometimes making things real is a step too far because it scares some people, or whatever reasons it is they have. I personally have enjoyed every adaptation where the monsters have been real. But at the time, were there ever any kind of comments about that, or kind of hesitations that kind of you were faced with?
Yeah, but not, it was, everyone was, doing it, I made the comment, so the monsters are real, there's no unmasking. And they're like, yeah, and I was like, well, okay. Didn't mean, why not? Why not? Because you have like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. They didn't meet any monsters until that one, and it's like, yep, they're real. It's like it's like they don't try and it's like that's kind of the way I felt about that. It's also just having the unmasking and stuff is like, yeah, that's great. I love that. I did the silly unmasking in Chill Out, because I go to Joe and I say, really? It's this little tiny Sherpa girl? It's like, how? It's like, how is she like, well, just figure it out. So I just had yank the head off, and next thing you know, there she is, kind of embarrassed in this big contraption that I invented. And it's like, wow, this girl's pretty inventive, that she came up with like this armature that is strong enough to punch through a window, and do all the things she's been doing. But suspension of belief. But it's a cartoon. But yeah, and I like the fact. Well, it's, and I actually drew for Alan because I didn't like some of the designs, like when the mystery machine turns into the monster machine at the end, you know, I saw what was being done and I went, no, 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 because I had done cartoons. So it's like, no, it's got to be a rat fink monster truck that, you know, come on. No, and so they, Alan said, whoop, have at it. And he just like, he was having a baby at the time, you know, so he said, hey, I got to go to the hospital. And so, but here you go. It's all yours. I'm like, thanks. I don't know if I should have done that, but I enjoyed drawing that, chasing everyone around the amusement park. You know, again, and yes, I invented the mystery machine bashing through the thing with all the little Scooby dolls. You know, it's like, which is like really weird that they would have Scooby dolls in this world, because, you know, are they celebrities? You know, no.
Well, suspension of disbelief, but obviously it's, I mean, the Goblin King is just, it just oozes Halloween, obviously. Were there any particular aspects that had to be included to fit the theme, given it was going to be a big Halloween movie?
Well, I mean, it takes place on Halloween, you know, and it has that, again, a musical number about eating candy, and it's Shaggy and Scooby. It's a very big thing. I mean, I don't know, do they do the same thing in England? You know, the trick or treating?
We do, but certainly not on the scale. We
Kind
love
of.
seeing American trick or treats because the decorations and everything are just
Yeah.
so much more impressive. I always seen anything in America's just always done on such a better scale. We love to see it.
We do.
Yeah, no, and it's like, and that's like that's another thing. Is like, it's very kids. That's what Halloween is to them, is, you know, trick or treating. It is the costuming and all that, and it's the ghosts and monsters and that kind of thought. But, you know, and I think that was another thing I really liked about that story was, you know, the monsters are real for this one night, you know, and this magician who is a lousy magician, you know, he captures basically Tinkerbell, you know, and for this one night, fairies are real, you know, monsters are real. It's like they all come alive, and it's, you know, so the kid, it's like it's actually a kind of an attractive fantasy for kids. Like, they're out that night and they're all in costume and the monsters are real. You know, they're not like interfering with what the kids are doing, but yeah. And I also like the fact it's like the Goblin King. I like the fact that it, you know, it intersects with very very European, you know, English kind of things with like the world of fairy. And I love that aspect of it too. You know, and I loved, it's like one of my favorite things was storyboarding was Broomy. You know, I love Broomy. You know, the witches, I mean, I'm doing the witches and stuff, and that was one of my favorite things was I actually got to do the Shaggy and Scooby flying on Broomy. And it's just, and I love the fact that where the Lauren Bacall witch goes to him, it's like, you know, takes him aside and says, now, if you're going to take him out for a ride, you know, it's like, he's going to try and get away from you, you know, and it's like, but don't you let him, you know. And of course, the first thing that happens is, boo, he just goes like all over the sky. And then finally, they get the hang of it and they start like really enjoying it, you know, and then they get shot down by the goblins, but that was all like inventions for the storyboard, by the way, and it was just really fun. And no one stopped me from drawing whatever I wanted.
Oh, well, I
Yeah.
definitely feel like, I think Scooby Doo in general is just so tailor-made for Halloween. It really does just fit. And obviously after Goblin King, I know you went on to work on other Scoobies like Mystery Incorporated, but just in
Yeah.
general, do you have a favorite memory from your time working on the franchise, just overall?
Well, I was working for Hasbro, and I was directing G.I. Joe Renegades, and I would get phone calls from Vic Cook, who, you know, I've been working with Vic Cook since Alf Tales. I hired him, you know, I was a young man at the time too, but I hired him as a young man, you know, and so, you know, he actually would hire me, but I'd get a phone call from him, and he knew I was full time at Hasbro, and he calls me up and he says, "Hey, I got a sequence where they're dragging a pirate ship, a Spanish galleon up a hillside. You've got to do it." I'm like, "Oh man, I'm busy. I got storyboards I'm putting together. No one else can do it. I'm not gonna hand it out to anyone else. You got to do it." Like, okay. And then the same thing with he calls me up and he says, "I've got the opening of the show where this motorcycle cop, you know, chases the ghost truck along the mountainside, a mountainside road. You got to do it." And I'm like, Vic just knew the stuff that I really enjoyed drawing, and he'd hand it over. So even though I was busy at Hasbro, I still worked on it. I still had, it was rough, you know, because it's like I didn't have any spare time. But yeah, he was right. He's completely right. And I enjoyed doing that stuff. You know,
That's amazing how like he was able to call you up and to trust you with that, and that's amazing because Vic Cook is like so established within that Scooby community as well that it's amazing to see all of that collaborative effort go into everything. It's absolutely amazing to hear, and because we've spoken quite a lot about Goblin King, and of course with it being October, this is going to be released as part of our Scoobtober interviews to go for Halloween. So in terms of the audience now, are there a handful or maybe one or two spooky movies or spooky TV shows that you can recommend to people to watch this time of year?
oh, you mean just movies in general?
Yeah, just in general, maybe something that you like to watch yourself or like anything like
Well, it's
that.
like, here it is. It's like, you know, it's like it's like one of my favorite films. And I don't know, this is gonna sound terrible, you know, because considering that, you know, we're talking about a kids show, you know, but something that one of my favorite movies, one of the best movies, and it always came on around this time of year, on local television when I was growing up in Connecticut. Connecticut's great for Halloween, by the way. But probably the best movie I think for Halloween was on Satan's Claw. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a pretty extreme movie. On TV, it was edited down. But it takes place right after the English Civil War. So it's got that atmosphere, and the actors, especially Linda Hayden, they speak in the period, you know, with Patrick Wymark, they speak like people from I believe it's the 17th century. They speak that way. And it's like when I was like maybe 11 or 12 years old when it first came out, when I first saw it, and it was like, you know, just freaked me out, totally freaked me out. But that's like one of my favorite movies to watch during Halloween. I'll watch it again this year. But again, it's pretty rough. You know, it's like in the 70s, the late 60s and the early 70s, they would make like pretty extreme movies, you know. So Halloween wise, yeah.
That's amazing. So we will recommend that with viewer discretion, of course, to see
Viewer
which
discretion. It's not. It's like, you know, I was probably too young to really be watching it because it stuck with me. But it's mainly, it's not that the monster is like that convincing, you know, but it's like the monster's not very convincing, but it's like what happens in the movie is just totally frightening and freaked me out.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to checking that out.
Yeah, Peter's Haggard, it's just, you know, it's just a great period piece. And then another one for Halloween, you know, and it's like, and for kids, always Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. It's like, that's just a hoot and a half. And it's a perfect Halloween movie. Perfect Halloween movie for everyone to sit around and watch, the whole family. You know,
like that.
and another scary one that I always like to watch is in America it was called Curse of the Demon, and I think in England, I think the original cut was Night of the Demon. But it's like a 1950s movie directed by Tavernier, I believe, and that's another creepy Halloween movie, I think. And it even has Neil McGuinness playing the evil, not a sorcerer, but he's like a warlock. He plays the evil warlock who is using his power and his his attachment to the spirit world, into controlling demons, and he's actually uses it to gain wealth and power, and it's just a great character. And then he has a Halloween party for all the local kids, where he comes out as like this happy-go-lucky I think he's like a clown. He's a clown character, and he's like giving out candy and stuff to the kids and doing magic tricks.
That does
So
sound
it's like,
interesting. There's like a range of, recommendations
Yeah,
for
certainly.
loads of different ages, which is absolutely incredible. We love to
Yeah.
hear that. And so we've spoken about, what's happened in the past and everything. And so just to kind of get into the process of wrapping things up, are you currently working on anything that's sort of coming or recently released that you can talk about at all?
God, right now, because we have the strikes going on, and they're still going on, and like not many people are working. The last animation series I worked on was the Harley Quinn show. But lately I've been doing, I've been doing commissions,
Oh, nice.
Oh, that's
Wow.
awesome.
Yeah, this is like a commission. I've been doing artwork for keeping busy, just doing commissions and stuff, which don't really pay the bills, but
So
know.
amazing
Yeah.
to see. Wow,
Yeah,
that's
and-
incredible.
like I have and that one was like for the Hero Initiative, which is a charity auction. I donated, that's one I did for where they auctioned it off, and I'm in very exalted company there because the Hero Initiative actually has like some of the best guys in the business, like Walt Simonson. I just look at it and I just think, God, my artwork's is at the same auction that these other guys are at, like Kevin Nolan and stuff like that. They're before my artwork, and I'm like, oh God, is mine even gonna sell?
I'd say it's there more than deservedly. It certainly has earned its place. That looked incredible. And I know it's fair to say that we're certainly hoping for more Scooby in your future as well. So can I ask, where's the best place for people to, follow your work as and when you're, involved with projects in the future?
Where's the best place? God. Depends what it is. I mean, I'm just thinking like if you go on YouTube and it's like, and I won't receive any money for it, but like Gen 13 feature film that I did, which was when I did it for Jim Lee in Wildstorm, and then Jim Lee sold his company, which included all the characters that are in Gen 13. So it didn't get a release in the United States because the rights to the characters and everything got, it's just one of those things. And Disney didn't want to promote DC's characters, and DC didn't want to promote, help out Disney. So, but it did get an international release. So it was in the UK, Germany, I've received different what do you call them? Different royalties from all over the world, Japan, it's everywhere else except the United States. So that is now on YouTube. If you look up Gen 13, the movie, it's on YouTube. So that's something that's, that it's not usual to see on TV. Right now it's like I'm working on comics. I did, if you go to the comic shop, I don't even know if it would be there, but I just did last year a comic with Paul Dini and Alan Burnett, who I worked with way
Oh,
back, you know. I did that comic with Paul Dini and Alan Burnett. It's the Batman Adventures Continue, and that was season 3. And I did the second issue of that, which is about Harley and her college girlfriend. And that's all I'll say about that. But if you get that issue, that's, I mean, I had a lot of fun doing that comic. So
that's incredible. That sounds amazing. I'll definitely be sure to check that out. But yeah, I
Yeah.
suppose that wraps up all the questions that we had for you today. But just thank you so much for coming on here and the time you've given us, because it's been absolutely incredible to speak to you about your career and all the amazing Scoobies that we grew up on and that we still love today. So thank you so much.
no, you're welcome.
Well,
No
thank you so
problem.
much to the audience as well. You can find all of our social links in the description down below. If you do want to see more, then please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.